By the time he reached the village, it no longer officially existed. The road to Blackwater End was still there, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt winding along a dead coastline, but every sign that should have named it had been torn down. Government maps showed only cliffs and marsh. Satellite records blurred the shoreline into static. Yet the houses remained, salt-stained cottages, a chapel with a broken bell, a harbor full of boats still tied in place. Every door was locked from the outside. Every window was shut. And on every interior wall, in the same crude hand, was the same figure, a tall silhouette, without a face. So where had they all gone? He came alone, as he always did, carrying a leather satchel and a camera. His dark suit was already rimed white at the cuffs from the road. Wind pushed through his golden curls as he stood at the edge of the harbor and listened. No gulls, no engines, only the soft knock of empty boats striking their posts over and over, like someone tapping from beneath the water. He was Elias Vane, a documentary researcher hired to verify whether Blackwater End had ever really existed. The official answer was simple: clerical error, folklore, collective misremembering. But records of births, property tax ledgers, and a school census from only 11 years earlier all listed 93 residents. Then, in a single month, the records stopped. The people vanished. The village name disappeared from print. No evacuation order. No death certificates. Nothing but absence. He chose the first cottage at the harbor's edge and pried open a warped kitchen window. The room beyond smelled of old brine and damp plaster. Cups still sat on a table. A loaf of bread had petrified beside a knife. Coats hung by the door. It looked less abandoned than interrupted, as if the owners had expected to return before evening. Then he turned and saw it. On the far wall, drawn in black wax crayon from shoulder height to the floorboards, was the silhouette. A child's hand had made it. The lines wavered. The body was too long, the arms too thin, ending in branching strokes like roots. But the worst part was the face. There wasn't one. Only an empty oval pressed dark and hard into the plaster, until the wax had cracked. Elias photographed it, then found another in the upstairs bedroom, another in the pantry, but another behind a wardrobe. All the same figure, repeated with increasing pressure, as if the child had been trying not to depict it, but to trap it. He moved through the village, cottage by cottage, chapel to schoolhouse, and the pattern held. Locked doors, tables set, the lamps empty of oil, but neatly trimmed. No blood, no damage, no sign of struggle, just drawings, dozens of them. Hundreds. In some homes, they covered entire walls, overlapping one another in frantic layers. In the schoolhouse, every slate had been scrubbed clean, except one where a single sentence remained in chalk. He stands where the sea forgets its name. Underwo, underwa, tja, Kandaresaya. Only so he forgets its name. Elias read it twice, then glanced toward the dark windows behind him. Who had written that, and why did it feel less like a warning than a memory? By dusk he found the village records in the clerk's office, swollen with moisture inside a rusted filing cabinet. Most pages had fused together, but one ledger survived. It charted the weather, the tides, and lighthouse signals. 3 weeks before the disappearance, the entries changed tone. Fog returned before noon. Children reported a man on the tide line. No footprints around him. Seen again after the bell. Same height as the signal post. On the final page, written so hard the nib tore the paper, were the words, "Do not let them draw him." Elias carried the ledger to the old inn where he planned to spend the night. He barricaded the door with a chair, lit an oil lamp from his field kit, and read until the room darkened around the circle of flame. The notes belonged to the village schoolteacher, Margaret Vale. She described children waking from identical dreams. A silent figure standing beyond the surf, visible only when fog crossed the water. At first they drew him because they said it made the dream go away. Then they began seeing him while awake, behind windows, between nets on the pier, reflected in tide pools after he was no longer standing there. The adults dismissed it as panic, until the drawings started appearing in houses where there were no children. A floorboard cracked overhead. Elias froze, lamp in one hand, the ledger in the other. The inn had been empty when he entered. He had checked every room, every hallway, every narrow closet with its hanging smell of mildew and trapped salt. Another sound came, soft, dragging, from the room above him, followed by 3 light taps. He climbed the stairs slowly. Each step answered with a dry groan. At the end of the corridor, the last door stood open. He was sure he had left it closed. The room inside was bare, except for peeling wallpaper and a child's bed frame. The window was latched. The air was cold enough to sting his teeth. On the wall opposite the bed, where there had only been water stains before, a fresh black line now curved downward in wax. Then, another line appeared beside it. Not quickly, not with a dramatic scrape. It emerged in tiny, trembling strokes, as if an invisible hand were still drawing. Elias backed into the hallway. The lamp flame thinned blue, then steadied. When he forced himself to look again, the wall held a new silhouette, taller than the others, shoulders pressed nearly to the ceiling. Faceless, dim-dong, watching. He did not sleep. And at dawn he followed the only clue the ledger had left unfinished, references to the old-sounding house beyond the marsh, where the first children had gathered for lessons during storms. The path was half swallowed by reeds. Mud pulled at his polished shoes. Every few yards he caught movement in the flooded grass. Only his reflection, he told himself, shuddering in wind-rippled water. But reflections should copy. These lagged half a second behind. The sounding house leaned at the edge of a sinkhole pond, its pilings black with rot. Inside, among collapsed desks and tide-blown sand, he found a tin box hidden beneath the floorboards. In it were 26 drawings tied with string, and a final letter from Margaret Vale. It explained everything. One winter, after a storm unearthed an old stone marker on the beach, the village children began playing around it. The marker was carved with no language Margaret recognized, only the same elongated figure, repeated in spirals. The oldest fishermen knew the story. Their grandparents had once called that stretch of shore the Nameless Reach, a place where, on certain tides, things lost their shape. Men sailing through its fog forgot their wives, faces. Dogs returned from the beach and would not look at their owners. Children, Margaret wrote, were more open to unfinished things. They saw what adults edited out. The figure in the drawings was not a man, and not a ghost. It was an absence given outline by witnesses, a kind of imprint left when something from the reach was observed. The more clearly it was seen, the more it could remain. The children drew it instinctively because drawing fixed its boundaries. A line around the faceless thing kept it from settling fully into the world. But then the adults began painting over the walls, scrubbing the slates, burning the drawings so the village would look normal again. That was the mistake. Without the images to contain it, the thing stopped appearing on walls and began appearing in memory. People forgot small things first, where they had left keys, how long they had slept, then names, then faces, then each other. Margaret wrote that neighbors passed in the street and failed to recognize one another. Mothers found children in their kitchens and asked whose they were. The final stage was erasure. Once a person looked at the faceless silhouette and no longer had enough self left to describe what they were seeing, the reach took them entirely. Not killed, removed from every record held in human minds and systems alike, as if identity itself had been pulled out by the root. Why were the doors locked from the outside? Margaret answered that too. On the last night, the remaining adults sealed every house, trying to keep the children and their drawings inside, believing the markings were the cause. The children covered the walls anyway. They were not summoning the faceless thing, but they were holding it back. And when the last drawings were destroyed, Blackwater End was taken. Elias lowered the letter with shaking fingers. The quiet around the sounding house had become unbearable. No surf. No wind. Just one distant sound from across the pond. A child's crayon, dragging slowly across wood. He turned. On the opposite wall, where the gray daylight reflected in warped glass, his own silhouette stood in the window. But Elias was not facing the window. Hung up, the silhouette had no face. He understood then why the village had vanished from maps. If the reach consumed identity, it would not stop at bodies. It would strip the names attached to place, to records, to memory itself. Blackwater End had not been covered up. It had been forgotten by force, because forgetting was the mechanism of the thing. He left before sunset, abandoning his satchel, his camera, even Margaret's letter. At the edge of the village, he stopped once and looked back. In the upstairs windows of the cottages, dark shapes stood perfectly still, one in each frame. Not people exactly, only vertical blanks where people should have been. Months later, the footage he shot could not be recovered. Every file from Blackwater End had degraded into static and a low knocking sound, like boats tapping from beneath the water. He wrote reports, but each draft became harder to complete. Street names slipped from him, then dates, then the village name itself. In his apartment, waking before dawn, he began finding black wax under his fingernails. The last thing he managed to do was pin children's paper across every wall. When they found him, the doors were locked from the outside, and on every surface of the room, drawn over and over in a desperate, trembling hand, was the same faceless silhouette, outlined again and again as if he had been trying